Today we're diving into a story that will make your blood run cold. A youth crisis that's spreading across two continents, religious tensions tearing apart American communities, political figures missing the mental sharpness we desperately need, a massive shift in who's actually getting American jobs, and a healthcare scandal that puts lives at risk. But here's the thing, the most shocking revelation, I've saved it for the very end of this episode. I spent years inside one of those big media machines. You know the ones. Polished studios, carefully scripted narratives, editors telling you what angle to take before you even saw the facts. I watched how stories got twisted, how inconvenient truths got buried, how the agenda mattered more than the reality. So I walked away. Now I'm here in Europe, independent, free to tell you what actually matters, connecting the dots they don't want you to see. And listen, before we get into this, I need your help. What we do here, it's not easy. Every story you're about to hear, I've spent hours fact-checking, cross-referencing, making sure we're not feeding you the fake news that floods your feed every single day. If you value that, if you want journalism that actually serves you instead of some corporate interest, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and honestly, if you can, consider sponsoring this channel. We're building something real here, and it only works if we do it together. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around until the end, because what I'm about to reveal in the final segment, it's going to change how you see everything. So let's start with Minnesota, because what happened there, it's not just a local scandal, it's a window into how vulnerable our entire system really is. We're talking about billions, yes, billions with a B, of taxpayer dollars that were supposed to help struggling families, fund programs for kids with autism, provide housing stability for elderly citizens. Instead, that money got funneled straight to Al-Shabaab, an extremist organization linked to Al-Qaeda operating out of Somalia. How does something like this even happen in America? Here's what investigators from City Journal and federal agencies uncovered. The money moved through something called hawala networks. These are clan-based money transfer systems that operate outside normal banking channels, nearly impossible for authorities to trace. The biggest scandal involved a program called Feeding Our Future, where 56 people were convicted and dozens more faced charges for stealing $300 million. But it didn't stop there. Housing programs meant for vulnerable seniors, autism support services for children, Medicaid benefits for low-income families, all of it got compromised. All of it became a pipeline for funding violent extremism thousands of miles away. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. Glenn Kearns, a former federal counterterrorism officer, testified that internal investigations showed these welfare recipients were systematically sending money to Somalia through unregistered cross-border transfer systems, and that's exactly how the funds reached extremist hands. The U.S. Attorney's Office estimates the total damage runs into the tens of billions, and much of that money, it's still flowing. Just in 2023 alone, Minnesota's Somali diaspora sent $1.7 billion back to Somalia, more than Somalia's entire official government budget. Now think about that for a second. But here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud, and I'm going to ask it. How much of that $1.7 billion started as American welfare payments? How much of it, originally funded by your tax dollars, meant to help people in need, ended up as operational funding for one of East Africa's most dangerous networks? Experts are telling us that portions of Medicaid payments, low-income assistance programs, all of it became the lifeblood of organized violence. This isn't just about Minnesota anymore. This is about systemic vulnerabilities that exist in every state, every program, every community where oversight is weak and political will is lacking. What this case revealed goes beyond financial fraud. It exposed how ethnically organized crime networks can exploit municipal structures, how data leaks and sloppy oversight create opportunities for massive abuse, and how the very systems designed to protect Americans can be turned into weapons against their own security. Politicians are demanding reform now, calling for total transparency, new control algorithms, tighter verification processes. Law enforcement officials are issuing warnings. As long as these holes exist in the system, your money, the money you work for and pay in taxes, can suddenly become ammunition used against your own safety. This isn't just Minnesota's lesson, this is a wake-up call for the entire nation about the real cost of unchecked bureaucracy and the desperate need for accountability on every single dollar spent. Now, let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. When was the last time you felt truly optimistic about the next generation? Because the statistics that just came out, they paint a picture that should terrify every one of us. In the United States and United Kingdom, 1 out of every 10 young people between 16 and 24 years old is doing absolutely nothing. Not working, not studying, not training for a career, not even raising children. They're just existing. The Brits have a term for it, NEET, not in education, employment or training. And the numbers are staggering. In the UK's third quarter of this year, that's 946,000 young people in this category. In America, the numbers are equally alarming and the trend is accelerating. Now here's what makes it worse. 39% of these young people are officially unemployed, meaning they want work but can't find it. But the rest, the majority, they're not even looking. They've completely checked out of economic participation, disconnected from the very idea of building a future. And if you think that's just a personal choice, a lifestyle preference, think again. This is an economic time bomb. In the United States, the loneliness factor is off the charts. Young people are now spending 7 hours a day in complete solitude. That's 40% more than just a decade ago. Analysts are calling it an epidemic of alienation, and it's not hyperbole. The Centers for Disease Control and Youth Futures Foundation research confirms that up to 20% of these NEET youth are struggling with serious mental health issues. Depression, anxiety, social withdrawal, these aren't just individual problems, they're societal crises in the making. But what's driving this collapse? Experts point to multiple converging factors, and honestly, none of them are getting better. There's the housing crisis. Young people can't afford to move out, can't start independent lives, stuck in their parents' homes well into their 20s or 30s. There's the anxiety about the future, climate concerns, economic instability, political chaos, all of it creating this sense of hopelessness. Inflation has made basic living unaffordable for entry-level wages. And then there's the job market itself, employers demanding years of experience for entry-level positions, creating this impossible catch-22 where you need a job to get experience but need experience to get a job. Governments are trying to respond, launching expensive integration initiatives to pull young people back into the workforce, offering training programs, subsidies, support systems. But so far the results are, let's just say, underwhelming. NEET rates keep climbing in the US, Britain, Canada, Germany, all across the developed world. The problem is getting deeper, more entrenched, harder to reverse. And here's what really keeps me up at night. These young people, they're not stupid, they're not lazy. Many of them have made a rational calculation that the system doesn't work for them anymore, that playing by the rules won't lead to security or success, that digital solitude is safer than the brutal competition and constant rejection of the real world. This threatens everything: economic growth, social stability, the basic functioning of society. We're watching an entire generation choose passivity and isolation over active participation in life, and if we don't figure out why and how to reverse it, we're looking at consequences that will reshape our world in ways we can't even predict yet. And honestly, the scariest part, the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to bring them back. Let me take you to Dearborn, Michigan, because what happened there last week, it's become a microcosm of the cultural and religious tensions ripping through America right now. The city council meeting turned into an all-out confrontation between America First activists and the pro-Muslim majority council. At the center of it, Jake Lang, a January 6 participant who received a pardon, stood up and delivered a speech that went viral instantly. He looked directly at the council members and said, "You're making our country look like the places you fled from. You're not welcome here. Get out of our country." Now, before you react, hear me out on what happened next. Dearborn's mayor, Abdullah Hammoud, fired back, his response equally blunt, essentially telling Lang to get lost, and that video racked up millions of views. Conservative media exploded, liberal organizations staged counter-protests, people marched through the streets chanting, "Dearborn has made it clear fascists are not welcome here." Right-wing activists showed up under banners reading "Americans Against Islamification." The city government, trying to calm things down, even attempted to lower the volume of the Islamic call to prayer, which only inflamed tensions further. Here's what this really represents and why it matters far beyond one Michigan city. This is the fault line running through modern America. You've got minority communities demanding protection, participation, the right to practice their faith and maintain their culture. You've got conservatives insisting they're fighting to preserve American identity, to save the country from transformation they never voted for. And you've got local governments trapped in the middle, trying to balance religious freedom with community cohesion, diversity with unity, constitutional rights with social harmony. Dearborn isn't an isolated incident, it's a preview. What happens when demographics shift rapidly? What happens when established communities feel displaced in their own neighborhoods? What happens when newcomers demand not just acceptance but institutional power? These aren't easy questions, and anyone telling you there are simple answers is lying to you. Every clash in that council chamber, every protest in those streets, every heated exchange that becomes a national headline, it's all part of a larger story about who we are as a nation and who we're becoming. And the most troubling part, both sides are absolutely convinced they're defending America, just very different versions of what America should be. Now let's talk about something that's become almost taboo in mainstream political discourse, but it's too important to ignore: the cognitive fitness of our leaders. California Governor Gavin Newsom's team just published a social media post that, quite frankly, left a lot of people speechless. They said they miss President Biden, the one with stamina and a working brain. They attached a photo of Biden on a bicycle, which immediately reminded everyone of that infamous moment when he fell off during a ride, became a viral meme, sparked endless debates about his mental acuity. Newsom himself has been walking a tightrope on this issue. He publicly supported Biden for a second term, campaigned for him, defended him against criticism. But in interviews and podcasts, he's let slip telling comments. "I only noticed signs of cognitive decline in Biden once," he said. Once, as if that's somehow reassuring, as if noticing it even one time isn't a massive red flag when we're talking about the person with access to nuclear codes. The discussion about Biden's mental state isn't just opposition talking points anymore. It's become a genuine concern across the political spectrum, even among Democrats who desperately want to believe everything is fine. And this whole episode has sparked a broader conversation about transparency. Should we require mandatory cognitive testing for presidential candidates? Should medical records be fully public? Should there be independent evaluations of mental fitness for anyone seeking high office? A whole generation of voters, they're exhausted by carefully worded statements and obvious cover-ups. They want leaders who are genuinely sharp, energetic, mentally present, not figureheads being managed by staff who make the real decisions behind closed doors. The bike photo, the stumbles, the verbal lapses, all of it has become symbolic of a deeper frustration. People feel gaslit when they see what they see, hear what they hear, and then get told by official sources that everything is perfectly normal, that any concerns are partisan attacks or misinformation. Medical professionals are now being called upon to analyze public appearances. Calls for mandatory testing are growing louder. Because at the end of the day, when every gesture, every word, every moment of confusion from a head of state can become grounds for national debate, maybe, just maybe, we deserve to know the truth about the mental fitness of the people we elect to lead us. Here's something that's reshaping the American workforce in ways most people aren't fully aware of yet. Indian graduates are flooding into the U.S. job market at record numbers, and the implications are massive. In 2024 alone, 422,000 students from India completed their studies at American colleges and universities and gained the right to work here. That's not just a big number, it's a fundamental shift in who's competing for American jobs and who's winning that competition. The surge is tied to visa policies that favor STEM graduates, science, technology, engineering, math. These graduates can work in the United States for up to 3 years after finishing their degrees, and with the tech and medical sectors facing severe talent shortages, companies are actively recruiting these fresh graduates. But it's not all smooth sailing. Competition is intensifying, especially as AI skills become mandatory for many positions. New tariffs and changes to H-1B visa policies are making the path more difficult for newcomers. Some companies are starting to prioritize American citizens for entry-level roles under political and public pressure. Yet despite these obstacles, the Indian diaspora has proven remarkably effective at lobbying for their interests. The Indian Student Mobility Report and Data USA show a well-organized support network, seminars teaching graduates how to navigate the job market, community assistance programs, mentorship from earlier waves of immigrants. It's a sophisticated system of mutual aid that helps newcomers integrate and succeed at impressive rates. This year, the number of Indian graduates entering the American workforce jumped 35% compared to last year. Analysts predict continued growth, particularly in artificial intelligence and biotechnology sectors. Now, this creates tension, obviously. On one side, you have Americans struggling to find work, wondering why positions are going to foreign nationals. On the other side, you have companies arguing they can't find qualified American candidates, that they need global talent to remain competitive. Anti-immigrant sentiment is rising, and federal agencies are tightening requirements in response. But here's the reality check nobody wants to acknowledge. The American economy needs skilled workers, and the education system isn't producing them in sufficient numbers domestically. So Indian migration has become not just a workforce issue, but a political factor with global implications. And the question we should all be asking, is this the future of American employment, increasingly dependent on imported talent, while our own young people struggle to launch careers? Let me hit you with a healthcare scandal that should terrify anyone who's ever set foot in a hospital. The UK's General Medical Council just released a report that reads like a thriller, except it's all true and it's happening right now. In 2024, Britain welcomed 20,060 new doctors trained abroad, significantly more than the number of graduates from British medical schools. The National Health Service was desperate for staff, so they hired aggressively, asked fewer questions than they should have, and the results absolutely catastrophic. Investigations by the GMC, The Times, and OCCRP uncovered something shocking. 22 doctors currently working in British hospitals had been banned from practicing medicine in other countries before arriving in the UK. Let that sink in for a moment. These weren't just people with minor infractions on their records. Some had faced complete bans on patient contact. Others had been punished for professional crimes, serious violations that ended their careers elsewhere. But somehow they made it through UK vetting and ended up treating British patients. It gets worse. Cases of identity fraud started emerging, doctors working under false names, forged credentials, fabricated qualifications. The system was so overwhelmed, so desperate to fill positions that basic verification processes apparently went out the window. And now 4,880 foreign-trained doctors left the NHS last year. That's 26% more than the previous year. Some left voluntarily, others were forced out when their backgrounds came to light, and the remaining staff are stretched even thinner trying to cover the gaps. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has promised reforms, pledging to create more positions for UK-trained doctors and, in his words, put an end to the absurdity of British graduates competing equally with foreign candidates who may not meet the same standards. But experts are sceptical. If the current trend continues, the NHS faces what they're calling a catastrophic staffing hole. Medical care quality is at risk of collapse in certain regions. Patients are starting to panic, wondering if the doctor treating them is actually qualified, if their credentials are real, if they're safe in the hands of the healthcare system that's supposed to protect them. This is what happens when desperation meets bureaucracy, meets cost-cutting, meets political pressure to keep services running no matter what. The UK healthcare system has become a cautionary tale about what not to do when facing a workforce crisis. And before anyone gets comfortable thinking this is just a British problem, ask yourself, how thoroughly is your local hospital vetting its staff? How confident are you in the credentials of the doctors treating you or your family? Because if it can happen in the UK's supposedly rigorous system, it can happen anywhere. So let's bring this all together, because these stories, they're not isolated incidents, they're all connected pieces of a larger transformation happening right now across America and Europe. We're watching our institutions face unprecedented challenges, from corruption scandals that funnel billions, to extremist groups, to an entire generation choosing isolation over participation, from religious and cultural conflicts tearing communities apart, to serious questions about our leaders' mental fitness, from massive workforce shifts that benefit foreign graduates while American youth struggle, to healthcare systems compromised by desperation and poor oversight. Every single one of these stories raises the same fundamental questions. How did we get here? Who's accountable? And most importantly, what are we going to do about it? The common thread running through all of this is a crisis of trust, transparency, and competent governance. People don't trust the welfare system to actually help people in need. They don't trust the job market to provide opportunities for their kids. They don't trust political leaders to be honest about their capabilities. They don't trust their healthcare system to verify that doctors are qualified. That's not sustainable. That's a recipe for societal breakdown. And here's where independent journalism, real journalism, becomes absolutely critical, because the mainstream outlets, the big corporate media machines, they're either ignoring these stories, spinning them to fit their narratives, or burying the most important details. That's why I walked away from that world. That's why I'm here, independent, free to connect these dots without someone telling me what angle to take or which stories to avoid. But I can't do this alone. This kind of journalism, it requires resources, time, relentless fact-checking, the willingness to dig deeper when everyone else moves on to the next headline. So if you found value in what you heard today, if any of these stories opened your eyes to something you didn't know before, I'm asking you personally, hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and honestly, if you can afford it, consider becoming a sponsor. We're not backed by corporate interests. We're not beholden to political parties. We answer only to you, the viewers who keep this platform running. Your support means we can keep investigating, keep reporting, keep holding power accountable. Every dollar goes directly into making sure you get the truth, the whole story, not just the convenient parts. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring enough to stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.